Now, warm welcome back to the Uxbridge FM History Show. Ken Pearce is back with another story back in history. This one is entitled Before the Penny Black. When you're ready, Ken.
Yes, thanks. Well, as you know, postage stamps were first issued in 1840. But how did the post function before that? The Royal Mail, of course, goes back to 1635, when letters were distributed across the country by horse-drawn coaches. We are fortunate to have a description of what happened from the reminiscences of an Uxbridge saddler and harness maker called Giles Hudson. I have mentioned him in talks earlier. And he tells us that every day a mail coach arrived in the high street about 4:30 in the morning from Oxford. The mail had been travelling overnight. The Uxbridge postmaster was roused and took in the letters for our district and handed over the post that he had collected destined for London. In the opposite direction, a mail coach came in about 10 o'clock at night, and a similar exchange took place. But the amount of mail before 1840 was not great, and envelopes were not common at all. Pages were usually folded in and sealed with sealing wax or some sort of glue. And the local postmaster was assisted by post boys who delivered the mail on foot. Now, the strange thing is that payment in those days was made by the people who received the letters, not the people who sent them. You may realize that this caused problems, especially when people didn't have the money. They couldn't pay, or in some cases, they couldn't even afford to pay. It was not unknown for a person to receive a letter, read it, and then hand it back and say they didn't want it. In addition, before 1840, there was no standard rate for payment. I mean, I don't know whether you've realised this, but if you send a letter to, shall we say, Denham, and another one to Dundee, it's the same cost. As a standard rate. Now, that did not happen before 1840. And in fact, Giles Hudson gives us an example. A letter to London would have cost 5p. It's very expensive. And a letter to Birmingham was 8p. So in those early days, the cost depended on how far the letter was going. The introduction of the postage stamp had immediate effect. If you wanted to send a letter, you had to first buy a stamp. Result, the post office got its money in advance. There were no arguments about paying when it arrived at its destination. And every letter cost the same, 1p, whether it was going to Denham or Dundee. And envelopes, as a result, became more commonly used, and the number of letters increased steadily after the introduction of stamps. Before we leave this subject, let's look back at that period in the 1830s, just before stamps were introduced. And we are fortunate to have an account of those days from the autobiography of John Bedford Leno, again, a man that I have mentioned on earlier occasions. This is what he wrote. I succeeded a friend as rural post boy under the postmaster of Uxbridge, William Lake, who was also a printer and stationer. It was then the custom to charge a penny over and above the ordinary post office charge for the delivery of a letter beyond the town paving. Now, there are only a few streets in Uxbridge paved at that time, but if the letter was going further than that, the postmaster could add a penny or two if he wanted to, and that presumably went to swell his salary. The portion of Lino goes on. The portion of country allotted to me consisted of Uxbridge Common, Ickenham, Ruislip, Eastcote, and their outlayings. I usually reached the post office not later than 6 o'clock in the morning, winter and summer. The farthest point of my round was about 7 miles from the office, but my daily journey, out and home, could not have averaged much less than 16 to 20 miles. And at that time, Sunday delivery was in vogue as well. For this amount of labour, I was paid the munificent sum of 3 shillings a week. The duties for one as young as me were undoubtedly severe, and the pay was ridiculously small. But I was pleased with my appointment, for my daily round was through pleasant fields, where birds sang and flowers grew. I saw the squirrel leap from tree to tree, wild rabbits sporting, the partridge whirring from my feet, the mowers and reapers at their labours, and better still, I was welcomed wherever I went. "Got any there for me, postman?" people would ask, who'd never had a letter in their lives. And they would turn away despairingly as I answered no. Then there were occasions when I was called upon to read the contents, and I found I had the power to create smiles and draw forth tears. I was only a boy, the listeners were adults, but I could read. I could do what they could not, and they were dependent on me. I liked reading letters, and I did read them, for there were no envelopes in those days to prevent me from doing so. I was the possessor of secret knowledge, and like a crafty statesman, I was proud of it.
Thanks, Ken. And I wonder if any of our listeners actually know how much a first-class stamp is at the moment. It's not written on the stamp, is it? It's cunning.
You tell us.
Well, it's £1.25 for one stamp.
Oh, really?
Outrageous.
That's yes. I better not talk about the management of the post office.
Thanks, Ken, for that. I'm sure we'll catch up again next month, and hopefully
Yes,
it'll be
indeed.
a bit warmer. We'll see. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
And you.